Actually, I think that the reason is, more than everything is you guys. Because, I compose so many TV episodes for very popular shows for kids. Never got one email. When they did one game, and my email was just, not everybody liked it, somebody. Anyways,
What do you say everybody liked it?
Exactly. So basically, I feel that the gamers, not even the avid gamers, but every gamer just cares so much about every aspect that has to be with the video game, and including the scores. They write about it, they listen, they buy. They are very, if you see, this is the difference between TV and games. TV or a movie, you just watch and, watch. You sit and watch. But games, you actually play. And they feel very active in the whole, production, creative, and, activity with the game. And we feel it. We feel the vibe and the whole recognition that music for games has grown. It's just amazing for us.
And the listener to a video game, he's living with your music for hours and hours and hours and weeks and months at a time, and he's listening to that over and over and over again. So you get a lot more connected to the music in a video game than you would any feature film or television show, just for this sheer amount of time that you're experiencing it. So, when people hear something on their favorite multiplayer map or their favorite menu, and that comes on, it's like, oh my God, I get to relax now and play my favorite game, and there's my favorite cut. So it makes sense that you would want to go out there and buy the soundtrack or rip it, whatever. Enjoy it. Yes.
That kind of ties into my next question regarding the community. I know Kevin and I actually do play Black Ops Zombies together. So I'm going to direct this question to you first, Kevin, because you do have a I know your community just because I've been involved with you in gaming quite a bit. How do you enjoy the community? Obviously it's something that's tied to the gaming. The gamers are very, like you said, are very avid and very passionate about what they're doing. So how are your feelings on that whole community vibe?
Well, like Inon and Sean said, with games it's so interactive. You constantly have people giving feedback to say like multiplayer, bring back the no scope. And when you have that amount of interaction, they feel free to say whatever they want about the music as well. So we start making the music interactive. For instance, like my songs are part of an Easter egg, so you actually have to unlock, and sometimes they're tied with the achievements. So now we're using music as part of the gameplay that you can get rewards for. But the community has been invaluable in both compliments and a large amount of criticism. About especially some of the newer tunes, they come on the YouTube page and Facebook, and I'm able to communicate with them. Like for instance, like if I'm doing something like this, I can tell them where I'm at. We do live streams with guys like you and Boasty, where we can have 200 people instantly come in there into a chat channel and watch us play live. And then it just helps, communicating your ideas, what you're doing when you're going to release something, and just keeping them involved and letting them have their opinion on something that you can do, that you can very much use.
Very cool. The rest of you guys, obviously you're talking about your emails that you've gotten regarding your music and what you're doing with the games. Do the rest of you, when you got into the gaming, obviously with the newer games, did that kind of pick up for you? Did you start getting a lot more, a bigger fan base on the game side of things? Did it just kind of like all of a sudden like, wow, I'm starting to get a lot of this stuff because of this game? Or is it kind of surprising to you? Or
people care about this music,
They do.
which makes it great. We're lucky to be working and being creative, but it's fantastic that people really love your music, appreciate it, and want to know more about it. And the contact, it's very, very much appreciated, and it's a great part of this.
One capacity that we have in video game which you don't have in movies or TV is you could turn off the loud music. And so we should feel very lucky if we get some comments from players. Not that we don't think that the reviews are important. They're very, very important. But just to get like a direct review or comment from a player, it means a lot. And the fact that they did not turn down the music You know, after playing hours and hours and hours for an online game or an RPG, man, that says a lot.
Well, yeah, those games last for days.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I'm going to take a few questions. If you get, does anyone have a question? Go ahead.
One question in 42 parts. This is money for Kevin. Kevin, I'm Ben. It's my son Nate. We're huge fans.
I remember you from the Facebook.
Yeah, exactly.
Glad you could come out.
Absolutely. The whole reason was because of the media and your reaching out. In fact, I think I suggested, hey, you should do an online. You said, how about if I showed up in person?
Right.
So awesome that you're here. What kind of gear do you guys use? You know, what are you writing with? When it comes down to it, is it just nothing more than a laptop and a controller, and you guys are just going at it? I mean, to what extent do you guys write the music and compose it and actually create?
Well, I'll start this one off, but these guys have much more experience in that than I do. But I use Logic for anything I'm doing, like with synth orchestral stuff. But as far as the rock tunes go, I try to cost Activision nothing when I make it. So I use drum samples and triggers so I can kind of play them in, and I have a bass and a DI that I use, and then a guitar emulator. And then we do all the vocal recording in the audio studio at Traer with the guys in the audio department. So we take zero budget doing that, and we try to match it up with the recordings that we hear. So that sounds legitimate, yeah. So they like the fact that it doesn't cost anything to begin with.
That's fantastic.
Or cost very little.
How about the rest of you guys? What does it take to write? I mean, obviously it takes quite a bit.
So, I mean, 20 years ago, you had to have a studio and musicians. Nowadays, because of the technology, because of software, you can sort of recreate an orchestra in software. Generally, I mean, I always have felt, and I still do, that real players make a huge difference. But you can certainly mock it up, and you're working for someone. You have to get their approval. If they don't like something, they let you know, and you fix it, change it, whatever, modify it. But then in the end of that process, generally, I get an orchestra and record that and then mix that in with my samples. But obviously, there's all this great technology out there. I use an application called Digital Performer. It uses Logic. These are common applications, and then tons and tons of samples and sounds that I have and buy constantly that add to my palette of sounds, from orchestral to all kinds of effects and you name it. So it's really like everything these days. Software and computers have made really enormous strides in what we're capable of technologically. It used to be the film composer had a piano and paper and pencil, and that was the extent, but nowadays it's unbelievable.
So, you know what? I actually have one more. I have a question. When it comes to composing for a video game, obviously this is something that has to start early on because they need an idea. You guys get the idea of what the sound they're looking for, what the game's going to be about. Do you actually get like kind of similar to how they did it? I don't know how they do it in movies now, but back in the day in the movies, you'd have the movie playing and be able to see and feel what that's going to look like. So do you get a preview of what the game looks like prior to writing the song, so you kind of get the feeling for each part of that, where that's going to go? Or does the company get that, you pretty much bring them the music and they say, well, this is going to sound good in this part of our game?
No, usually, the company usually brought out to the process very early, so there's almost nothing. So we get some concept art, which is really cool. We get some, very, very basic definition. But, big part of writing for computer games is just using your imagination, because there's not a lot to work with. There's no pictures, there's no movie, there's nothing basically. Vague descriptions.
Sometimes I do the game is sufficiently advanced that I get, they'll play the game in the section that they want me to compose for. They'll tell me, I will get an in-depth description of what they want the music to do. By then I'll understand the game. But they'll actually do a video capture of gameplay. And though the player experience will not be locked to that, because everyone plays the game differently, different things trigger music, there's interactivity. But it'll just give me a feel and a vibe for that, what's going on visually and what you're doing at that time, which is, I find really helpful. But as Inon says, you don't always get that. Sometimes you're involved and you're having descriptions by the audio director?
I've started all of my game projects with cutscenes that were static scenes with some dialogue, and that helps me establish a tone for the game. And then I'll get gameplay playthroughs of levels that I'll score just like I would score a motion picture.
I have a question for you actually, Sean. When you were writing the score for the Black Ops, for the single player, obviously the single player is the Vietnam-based. Did the music at that time have any influence on your writing?
Originally, we discussed a lot about bringing in elements from the 60s. And as the game moved away from being about Vietnam and more about covert operations all around the world, the game really developed. I worked on it for a year, so I was there very early on. And it changed quite a bit from the beginning to the end. So as it became less about the Cold War in Vietnam and more about Black Ops and a time period of about 8 or 9 years, then I saw that the world opened up musically. And we were in Southeast Asia, so I could combine some of the elements of the locales there. We were in Kazakhstan, so I was able to use more Russian-influenced themes. So we really globe-trotted, and I would, try and use attributes and ethnicities from those areas. But I was more interested in getting a psychological focus with the music more than anything. It was all about the paranoia of the Cold War and all about, just being covert and being a badass. So,
I get that feeling,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, again, with all the music and all these games, again, without that music, I think the games would just kind of be an empty slate. It'd be like okay, well, I'm gonna shoot this guy. Okay, we don't get that. We get that sense of feeling. We get that heart pounding. The music's building up. We know something's gonna happen. We don't know what. And I like that. I think that's the feeling of all the gamers is. Without this music, we wouldn't have that feeling in our games. It wouldn't be like us actually being in the movie and playing that movie and being a part of this. So I think the music helps with bringing us back to that. So thank you. Do I have any more questions? You got first.
Yeah, I've read some articles before about how music is being more of a dynamic force in games and how sometimes, like if you're in a fight scene or something, the music will pick up, and if you're in a slow-paced section, the music will kind of be really low-key. How much does that come into when you guys compose music?